You know, my service in the latest celebration has so many rewards, such as being able to introduce our next lady. I have grown to love this lady in the last 3 years, probably more than ever in my entire life. She's really a great supporter to me. Our guest tonight is Lib Fowler, one of our very own ladies here at Bowling Springs First Baptist Church. Lib really had no intentions of becoming a speaker until she became very mouthy. She became mouthy while trying to survive her midlife crisis. Now Lib uses humor to challenge her audiences to live life to its fullest. She is a member of the National Speakers Association and is currently serving as president of the Carolinas chapter, where she was recently voted Member of the Year by her peers. Lib and her husband Jerry, who also is a speaker, and they live right here in Bowling Springs. They have 3 sons, 6 grandchildren. I understand some of these grandchildren are here tonight, and 1 great-grandson. And they are members here at Bowling Springs, and Lib is proud to be the teacher of the Friendship Sunday School class. Before she felt God's call to become a professional speaker, Lib was employed with the Spartanburg County government. She has shared her humor and positive message with audiences throughout the Southeast. Now let's please welcome mouthy Lib Fowler.
But they said when they introduced me, as Marlene was saying, before I became a professional speaker, I worked for Spartanburg County. And I worked for Spartanburg County for a long time. And as most of you know, when you work any place for any length of time, the people that you work with get to be just like family to you, don't they? As a matter of fact, it's a scary thing to think that we actually spend more waking hours with our co-workers than we do our own family. But I bet I could go around the room. If you've worked any place any length of time, you could tell me who your favorite character is in your workplace, because we all have a favorite character in our workplace. Well, I want to tell you about mine. This was a little woman named Emily. Now, Emily had moved here from Egypt about 10 years before I met her, and she was a delightful little lady. She was short, and Emily spoke the English language very well, but she didn't understand a lot of our slang expressions. Well, there was a young woman in the office named Mary Jane, and Mary Jane was young and pretty and single. And then there was a guy that was doing some contract work for Spartanburg County named Greg, and Greg was young and handsome and single. So as you can imagine, Mary Jane's eyeing Greg, Greg's eyeing Mary Jane, but neither one of them would make that initial move. Well, one day, Mary Jane happened to be in Emily's office, and she knew she was expecting a call from Greg. And about that time, the phone rang. Mary Jane jumped up and she said, "Emily, I've got an idea. If that's Greg, ask him if he wants to meet me for happy hour." Emily said, "Okay." She picked up the phone, and sure enough, it was Greg, and she said, "Greg, Mary Jane said you meet her, she'd make you happy for an hour." Well, needless to say, that kind of ruined the romance, but I hope I can make you happy for a little while this afternoon anyway. But I want you, if you would, travel back with me to your childhood, when you were a little girl. Do you remember the days when you were a little girl and you'd sit around with your friends and you would talk about what you would be someday when you grew up? You remember those days? I can remember them well because I had some friends, and we'd sit around and talk about what we would be someday when we grew up. And my friends all had goals that they set for themselves. One of them was going to be a teacher. One of them was going to be a movie star. One of them was going to be a nurse. But you know, when I was a child, I didn't really have any goals. Because you see, as a child, I had such low self-esteem that I could not imagine myself ever growing up to be anything. Now, I didn't have any goals, but I had a dream. You see, when I was a little girl, I used to dream I could fly. And I used to sit out on my front steps, and in my mind's eye, I would fly across the street to a big tall tree, because you see, once I got to the top of that tree, I didn't have low self-esteem. I was pretty at the top of that tree. Now let me tell you that I was a skinny little old thing. I had these little old legs. Had a brother-in-law used to look at me and he'd say, well, you look like you swapped legs with a blue jay and got cheated out of part of your hiney. And my goodness, my nose was much too big, and it was kind of wide and had a hump in it, and I'd stand and look in the mirror and think, I wonder how big it's going to get. Of course, it's come in handy since I started wearing glasses. I don't have to worry about it sliding off my nose. And then I had big old freckles, and I had bangs and pigtails. You know, nowadays they call them braids, but some of you remember back in the days when they were called pigtails. And so here I stood with these little old skinny legs and big old freckles and bangs and pigtails, and oh my goodness, I was a sight. And now my mother, bless her heart, I guess she had her own problems to deal with, because she just really couldn't reach out and help me. But you know, our mothers give us words of wisdom sometime. And I want to share with you tonight some words of wisdom that my mother gave me when I was a child. You see, when the going got really tough and Mama felt like she couldn't take any more, she would grit her teeth and she'd say, I'm just going to go out in the desert and die and let the buzzards eat me. Well, you admit that'd solve all your problems. But it seemed like my mother, it seemed like that she was always old. And I don't mean old like having a lot of birthdays. I mean that old that's lack of enthusiasm. Of course, I have to admit that my mother was 40 years old when I was born. And I'm sure if there was ever a day she wanted to go out in the desert, die, let the buzzards eat her. It's when she found out she was expecting her fourth child at age 40. Now, not only was my mother 40 years old when I was born, but my daddy was 58. For the first 3 years of my life, I thought my name was Whoops. Y'all got to wake up, they're catching them better than... But I will always remember the year that I turned 14. And Easter was approaching. And Mama decided it was time for me to have my very first pair of nylons. How many of you in here remember nylons? Let me see your hands. Oh yeah, that's a lot of you remember. And I saw a lot of hands that didn't go up. So a lot of you don't have a clue what I'm talking about. So let me tell you about nylons. You see, nylons are not like pantyhose, because pantyhose stretch. Nylons didn't stretch, and they were shaped like a woman's leg, a big old woman's leg. And Mama took me over to J.C. Penney's over in Greenville, because we didn't have a J.C. Penney's in Spartanburg back in those days. So we got over there, and she took one look at my poor little legs, and she said, I expect we better get you a garter belt. Y'all remember the garter belts? And of course, now, they didn't have junior size dresses back in those days like they do today. So by this time, I had gotten tall. Hadn't put on much weight, but I had gotten tall like a broomstick. And I had to get an adult size dress for the length. Well, this Easter was going to be my coming out. I was going to get to wear little high heels, and I was going to be all dressed up. So I got up that Easter Sunday morning, and I hooked that garter belt around my middle. And I pulled those nylons over my poor little leg, and I fastened the garter belt. I looked down at it, they just flapped around my leg and didn't touch it anywhere. I put that dress on and zipped it up. The whole front of it just collapsed. The only thing that stuck out that Easter Sunday morning was my nose. Of course, I hadn't a whole lot changed since then, but that's okay too. Now, the ones of you that remember those nylons, what was up the back side of that nylon? Seams. Y'all remember we used to have to go around saying, are my seams straight? I guarantee you my seams were not straight that Easter Sunday morning. Now, some of you have no clue, the ones didn't put up their hand, you don't know what nylons are. Well, I was speaking in Kentucky a few years ago, and that was a woman that had just cleaned out her elderly aunt's apartment. And she brought me an authentic pair of nylons. Now, this is what we used to, Now you see that shape like a big old woman's leg. That's what we had to put up with. But now times have changed. You see, we don't have to wear nylons anymore. We have pantyhose. We have pantyhose that stretch, and they come all the way up to here. And also, you know, ladies, the styles have changed. You know, nowadays when we have panties that we can go to the store and we can buy all kinds, shapes, sizes, all colors, little lacy, pretty ones, thongs. We have a choice now. But then let me tell you that your grandmas and your great-grandmas and your great-great-grandmas did not wear panties. They wore drawers. Step-ins. And the straddle hung down to here. And I asked Mama one day, I said, Mama, why do you even bother to put on a pair of drawers when the straddle's hanging down to here? She said, because you never know when you're going to be in a accident. You got it. Now just imagine being wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. The nurse takes one look at you and she says, oh, doctor, come here quick. We got a woman that's been brought here and she ain't got on no drawers. Now, some of you that don't remember the nylons, you don't have a clue what I'm talking about. I just happen to have a pair of drawers. Now, how many of you can remember seeing these things flapping on the clothesline? Well, I managed to survive that Easter, and you know, I grew up in church. I grew up, as a matter of fact, at the First Presbyterian Church in Spartanburg, and went to Sunday school in church all my life. And when I was about 12 years old, my mother decided it was time for me to join the church. So I joined the church and became a church member. Well, when I was about 16, a friend of mine came to me one day and she said, Lib, are you a Christian? And I thought, well, now that is without a doubt the most ridiculous question anybody has ever asked me. Am I a Christian? I lived in the United States of America. My money said, in God we trust. I knew who Jesus Christ was. I knew that I firmly believed that he was the Son of God, that he had died on the cross, that he had risen from the dead, and I believed that. So I said, of course I'm a Christian. I thought that was a ridiculous question. But then I found out later, maybe that was not such a ridiculous question. You see, when I got out of high school, I really wanted to go to college, but I was afraid. I didn't have the confidence that it took to go to college because I thought, now, if I go to college, I'm sure that I'll fail. My friends went off to school, and one of my friends, Joyce Redwine, who we were really good friends in grammar school, but in high school, we didn't have classes together, so we had kind of gone our separate ways. But Joyce was at college, and she came home for spring break. And Joyce didn't forget about me. She remembered me. At this point in my life, I was a mixed up, frightened teenager. I was afraid of life. I didn't know what life held for me, and I was afraid. One Saturday morning, Joyce called and said she wanted to come and see me. Well, she came over to my house, and she was sitting there, and she started talking about Jesus Christ like he was her best friend. And to be honest with you, it made me very uncomfortable. Because although, you know, I grew up in church, in my home we didn't talk a lot about, the name Jesus Christ didn't come up a lot. Well, she convinced me, she said, we are having a youth rally tonight. And this was at a Methodist church, a Methodist youth rally over in Duncan. And she said, the speaker tonight is Buddy Gaines. Now, Buddy Gaines and I had gone from the first grade all the way through and graduated, and he went on to become a missionary. But she intrigued me, she insisted that I come. So I went to that Methodist church with her that night to that youth rally, and her mother let us out, and she said, I'll come back and pick y'all up in a couple hours. Well, we got there, And I was standing there, and I don't remember what was said. I just know that it suddenly, a veil was lifted from my eyes, and I realized that I needed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. One of the guys had asked the leader, Buddy Gaines, said, what if you go to a place and you know that Jesus wouldn't want you there? And he said, if you have to turn around and say, Jesus, you wait outside, don't go there. And I'm thinking, if he says that, then that means Jesus is real. He's not somebody way up there. He's real. And I realized that I needed him. And I began to weep. They had an invitation. Now, mind you, I grew up in a Presbyterian church. I was not accustomed to people going to the front, but a lot of the young people would go into the front. But I didn't. I was standing there, and my friend Joyce said, do you want to go down front? And I just shook my head. I honestly thought that I could not make it because I was crying so hard. Buddy Gaines saw me. He saw my dilemma, and he left the front of that church, and he came back to where I was in my pew, and I knelt there in that pew and said the sinner's prayer. I knelt down there, a mixed up, confused teenager, and I got up a child of the King. As many times as I've told that story, it still brings tears to my eyes. We had a social afterward, and so we went down, and my tears had long since dried up. But Ms. Redwine came and picked us up. And when I got in the car, she took one look at me and she said, Lib, you have been with the Lord. I can see it in your face. She could see a change in my appearance. Oh, what awesome time that was. What an awesome time. And I almost missed it because I thought I was a Christian. Well, right about then, I was out of high school, and I started dating Jerry, the man that I eventually married. And you know, we women, we want to know that this is the one that God would want us to marry. We want to know that. So I prayed, and I prayed hard. I was a new Christian, and I prayed, Lord, is this the man that you would have me marry? And I prayed until I felt this overwhelming peace. Yes, this is the one I would have you marry. So we got married, and we lived happily ever after. Yeah, right. I tell you, there's many times through the years that I've said, okay, Lord, admit it. You made a mistake. Of course, we've been happily married now for 37 years. The other 10 have been questionable. But the first year we were married, we had a son. 15 months later, we had twin sons. Red-headed, freckle-faced, identical twin sons, mean little kids. And my mother would call me up every day and she'd say, you know there's no way you can take care of 3 babies in diapers. You're going to have a nervous breakdown. You're going to land up in a mental institution. Your babies are not going to have a mother. Oh, thank you, Mom. I really appreciate that kind of encouragement. Of course, Mama was wrong because all of our sons are grown now, and I consider myself reasonably sane. Of course, there were a lot of days when our boys were growing up that I thought a lot about the desert. And we were poor. We were so poor, our boys grew up, they thought that irregular was a brand name like Izod. And these little fellas, now they could fight. I'm telling you now, they could fight like you wouldn't believe. And about the time that they were about 4 years old, we moved up to Boiling Springs and lived beside the seas. And they had a little boy named Craig, and David, Danny, and Jerry, they played together all the time. They were just constantly playing together. And one Sunday at church, Craig mentioned, he said, we won't be at church tonight because my cousin's going to be baptized and we're going across town. Well, sure enough, that evening they went across town and he got to see his cousin baptized. And on the way home, this little 4-year-old boy said, Daddy, how come my cousin got to be baptized? And his daddy said, son, because the Lord saved her. He said, Daddy, I want to be baptized. And he said, Craig, you're really just a little bit too young to know what that means now. You really need to wait a while. You don't really understand what it means about the Lord saving you. He said, Daddy, I can be baptized right now because the Lord has saved me many times from them Fowler boys. And Craig's sister and Mama are sitting back there, and they can attest that's a true story. And then they got to be teenagers. Oh, 3 of them going through puberty at the same time. Now, I don't know about your teenagers. By the way, how many of you here have now, have had in the past, or will have in the near future teenagers? Now, I don't know about little girls, but little boys do not pick up their underwear out of the bathroom floor. It just ain't going to happen. And now I was real smart because, see, from the very beginning, they all wore the same size underwear. So when I'd go down and buy a new crop of underwear, I had these little rubber stamps made that said Jerry, Dave, and Danny, and I'd stamp the inside of the underwear so I could divide them up right. I thought that was pretty brilliant. So, and they had a lot of it. This was back in the 70s when they had that long hair, and they took a minimum of 2 showers a day. Well, I had even made them get up out of the bed, out of a deep sleep, and said, you go and put your underwear in the laundry room. And I had it up to here. And I said, okay, this is it. From now on, if it is not in the laundry room, it will not be washed. Well, the underwear began to pile up in the bathroom floor, a minimum of 6 pair a day. And it got deeper and deeper and deeper. Until finally, one morning, one of the boys came running in with a towel draped around him. He came running in the kitchen. He said, Mama, I can't find any clean underwear. I said, you just scratch around that pile and find the cleanest dirty pair. And when he stomped off down the hall, and I said, and turn them wrong side out. Now, don't you know they were proud that morning that their underwear had Jerry, Dave, and Danny stamped inside of it? But you know, I went through those years, and my identity was I was Mrs. Jerry Fowler, or I was Jerry, Dave, and Danny's mother. But you know, I had not really discovered who Lib Fowler was. And then, one day, the nest was empty. I was 45 years old. My marriage had started going through a midlife crisis that so many marriages go through. And we were struggling. And I went in the mirror, and I was looking in the mirror, and you know what I saw looking back at me? I saw an old, tired woman. And at that point in my life, I just didn't want to live anymore. And I cried out to God, and I said, God, please just let me die. Just let me die. I don't want to live anymore. But God's so good, isn't He good? And you know, during those times when I was so devastated because I saw my marriage beginning to crumble, and for the first time in my life, I thought I may land up by myself. And I was terrified. And I cried out to God, and I said, God, please take this pain away. Just let me die. Just take the pain away. And there was silence. I heard nothing. And I would cry out and say, God, please help me. And there was silence. And I thought, where is He? I accepted Him. He's supposed to be here to help me. But I felt nothing. But I realized later on when I look back that He was there all the time watching me struggle. How many of you have ever seen a little baby learn to walk? You see your little child learn to walk, and when that little baby takes a couple of steps and they fall down and they cry, and you peep around the corner and you watch them struggle to get on their feet, because you know when they get up by themselves that they will make them stronger. And I realized that's what God was doing. I was His child, and He was watching me struggle because He knew that struggle would be good for me. But you know, God had a plan for my life, just like He has a plan for every single life in this room. You know, in Jeremiah 29:11, we hear, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. He has plans for each one of us. But you see, the next day when I had this devastating experience of looking in the mirror and seeing this old tired woman looking back, I went to work the next day, and my dear friend, Juanita Holt, that I have worked with for many years, and I'm honored to have her here tonight, I was telling her about this terrible experience. I said, I just don't want to live anymore. And she sat there a minute, she said, Lib, you have been so down lately. You need to do something just for yourself. And I said, yeah, like what? She said, well, I don't know. Why don't you go to modeling school? And I said, modeling school? Are you out of your mind? Just look at me. Do you think I could be a model? And she said, now wait a minute. You said you didn't want to live anymore. If you don't step out and take a chance, you will never know. With her encouragement, I went to the phone and I called a local modeling school. And I said, is there anything you could do to help a depressed old lady? Now, oddly enough, when I said God was in control, those classes started about every 4 months. And the class was starting the very next night. And I said, you put my name down, I'll be there. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was go to that modeling school. And when I got there, they asked each one of us, why are you here? And I said, I just want to be the very best Lib Fowler that I can be. You know, I got in my car that night and I cried all the way home. I thought, I know those people out there laughing at me. An old woman like me thinking she can be a model. But you know, they didn't laugh. They took me in and lifted me up and encouraged me. Ladies, I ask you tonight, do you have encouragers in your life? Do you have people that lift you up when you're down? Or perhaps you can be on the side that my friend was on, and you see someone that's hurting. And you, because you cannot lift up another human being without being lifted up yourself. And and I have been so grateful, and Juanita and I have talked about it many times. I said, why did you, I've known you so many years, I've never heard you mention modeling school. She said, I don't know, it just kind of came to me. And we know where it came from, don't we? Well, I continued to go to modeling school, and every week when I went back, it was like a shot of confidence that I started looking at myself a little differently in the mirror. And I kept going to these classes, and finally it came time for my very first fashion show, and I was absolutely terrified. And they gave me an assignment. They said, call the store to schedule an appointment to go in for your fitting. So one day at work, I mustered up all the courage I could get, and I went to the phone and I said, hi, this is Lib Fowler with Take Two Modeling Agency. I'd like to schedule an appointment to come in for my fitting. Well, the woman was very gracious, and we scheduled the appointment, but before she hung up, she said, oh, Lib, I am looking so forward to meeting you. And I thought, oh, no. And I ran in my friend's office. I said, this is terrible. She said, why, what happened? I said, well, I called and scheduled an appointment for the fitting. And she said she was looking forward to meeting me. And she's going to expect somebody coming out that's tall and slim and gorgeous. My friend looked up and she said, hey, you're tall and slim. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I went on to become a professional model, something that I never dreamed that I could do. Now let me ask you, I became a professional model. Are you a model? Each one of you is a model. We are a model when we go out into the world as Christians. You model Jesus Christ. So each one of you, someone's watching you. You are a model for someone. Well, that fall, I went to Hilton Head Island to compete in the Models of the South convention. Now, one of the areas of competition they had was photography. They showed my slides on a big screen, close-ups of my nose. And I had to stroll out in front of several hundred people with high heels, a leotard and tights. And then when I strolled out and I struck my modeling stance, and I thought, Elizabeth, do you have any idea what you're doing? You are exposing your legs for the world to see. But I won first place in that competition because I was the only one down there that had skinny legs. But as I went forward that night at the banquet, when they called my name for that first place trophy, and I went up there and I held that trophy in my hands, and it suddenly occurred to me, I had fulfilled my childhood dream. You see, I could fly. But for the first 45 years of my life, I never had the courage to spread my wings to see if I could fly. You know, even those little baby birds know that they have to get out of their nest and spread their wings to be the little bird that God wants them to be. But you know, sometimes we want to get comfortable. We want to get in our little comfort zone. And we don't want to step out and take a chance. But that's when God can use you, when you spread your wings and fly. How many of you here think you're smart as a chicken? You think about that little dumb chicken knows that he's got to get all that shell pecked away from him so he can be the little chicken God wants him to be. But you know, we kind of build our shell around us. If somebody hurts our feelings, we feel rejected, something happens, but we build our little comfort zone, and that's our little shell, and that's where we want to stay. Get it away from you. Don't let it bother you. Now, I need some help up here right now. I need 4 volunteers, and don't everybody rush up here at the same time now. Okay, I need 4 volunteers. Who's going to be my first volunteer? I have names. Better get up here. Okay, got one right here. Y'all give them some encouragement. Come on, come on. 2 of my granddaughters. Okay, we got 4 right here. Okay, no, you got to come up here, honey child. You don't get to stand down there. Come on. Yeah. Yeah, we got a model. Come. Well, and these are 2 of my granddaughters. Now, what's your name, honey?
Suzanne.
Suzanne. Okay, good. Oh, hey, we got 5 of them. That's all right. We can handle it. We can handle it. Y'all just spread out. No, you got to get here. So there you go. No, I don't want you to behind me. All right, now let me tell you what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be rapping. Now, I'm going to give you some instructions because this is the way we're going to do our rap. When I give you the signal, you're going to go hoo, 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 hoo. Okay, now let's try that. Let's go that way. Hoo. You got to go whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, okay. Whoa, whoa. You got it. All right, let's go. Hoo, 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 hoo. Okay, now, and now when I say the word now, when I get to the last verse, when I say now, this is way in the rap. Your word, Y-O, your word. Let's try it now. Your word, y'all gonna be good. Y'all gonna be good. Now listen, I want you to listen to the words of this rap because it has a message. But if we're gonna rap up here, what do we need from y'all? We need a little rhythm. So we want some snapping of fingers. Everybody snap your fingers. 2 little birds sat in the nest, and they wouldn't try to fly like all the rest. One said to the other, I'm afraid I'll fall. You're right, said the other, and that ain't all. If we stay in our nest high up in the tree, we'll be safe together, just you and me. Hoo, 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 hoo. So they settled right down in their nest, and they wouldn't try to fly like all the rest. And then one day when they were snug and warm, the wind began to blow, and up came a storm. Hoo, 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 hoo. Now that tree began to bow and sway, and it tossed one bird out of the nest that day. He crashed to the ground right on his head, and the other bird thought for sure he was dead. Hoo, 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 hoo. But the bird on the ground shouted up to the other, I know why I fell, so listen to me, brother. We both were afraid that we couldn't fly, but we never did spread our wings and try. Hoo, 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 hoo. Before a day was done, both birds soared high because they'd learned a lesson when the storm came by. Now they fly with all the rest because they know what it takes to be their best. Hoo, 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 hoo. If you're sitting in your nest, safe and warm, what will you do if it comes up a storm? You will never know if you can fly until you spread your wings and try. Now, your word. Y'all give them a hand. Y'all can get this way. You know, there was a little boy in Spartanburg some years ago, 6 years of age. He came to his parents one day and he said, I'd like to learn to play a violin. Well, they did what any red-blooded American parents would do. They went and bought the little fellow a violin and they signed him up for violin lessons. And oh, he just practiced his heart out. And it came time for his first recital. And they were so proud of their son. And they went to the recital and sat right on the front row. They went out and they bought him a little white shirt and a little suit, a little bow tie, had him all dressed up. So they sat right on the front row, and here he came out on the stage with 4 other little boys. Now just picture 5 little boys up on a stage, and they raised their violins and they started to play. And it was awful. And the mama went to Daddy and said, "That's something bad wrong." He said, "I know. I don't believe he's playing the same song the other children are playing." Well, after the recital was over, they went up to their son. They said, "Son, we are so proud of you. But tell me, were you playing the same song that the other children were playing?" The little fellow looked up and grinned real big. He said, "No, ma'am, because I didn't know that song real well, so I played the song that I know best." Now, you know, that little fellow was not mature enough, as we all are, to know how important it is when you're playing on a team or you're playing with a group that you all play the same song in order to make that beautiful music together. But you know, he had a courage and a wisdom that many of us forget when we're grown up. You see, that little fellow had searched his heart, and he knew the song that he could play best. So he had the courage, regardless of what anybody else was doing, to step forward and play the song that he knew best. Now, I ask you tonight, ladies, have you searched your heart? Do you know what song you play best? You know, your song in you is the gift that God gave you, and He gave each one of us a special gift. Each one of you in here are gifts. You have gifts and talents. Some of you are using those in a powerful way, but there may be others that you haven't discovered yet. And some of you aren't searching deep enough to find those talents because they're there. So I challenge you, because you see, it takes cooperation from everybody. It takes many gifts. You know, we are the body of Christ, and all the different parts that we have, that's what we bring together for His glory and for His honor. What is your gift? Are you a leader? Are you a teacher? What about you sing? Are you a musician? Are you an encourager? Are you the one that writes cards and encourages people? What is your gift? We all have those gifts, and I challenge you to find those gifts and use them for God's glory, because that's what He wants to do. This event that takes place, all of these ladies, they bring their gifts together, and they mesh together, and they create something like this for us to enjoy. But it takes all their different talents coming together. So I challenge you to use those talents and use them well. One of the things that when I talk about encouragement and writing notes, my friend Joyce Redwine, after she led me to the Lord, I got a letter from her, and my Sunday school class knows this letter well. I've read it every Easter, haven't I? Every Easter I say, "What's coming?" and they say, "The letter." The letter is dated April the 1st, 1958. Now I know all of you out there saying, 1958, this woman is older than dirt. I'll tell you how old I am. Bill Drake has a speech class. I go over there once a semester and teach one of his classes for him on adding humor to a presentation. And he has the students evaluate me, and they rate me a scale from 1 to 10, and then they have to explain why they gave me that rating. Well, the last time I was over there, he sent me my evaluations, and one student had given me a 9, which I thought was pretty good. And she had written these words. She said, "I enjoyed Mrs. Fowler's presentation very much. I learned a lot. She was a very good speaker, and I would like to see her come back sometime." And then at the bottom she said, "You don't see many old people that happy." But this is a letter, and I want to read to you what I read to my Sunday school class, because you see, I had written to Joyce because I was trying to lead another friend to the Lord, and I wasn't sure exactly how to do it. So I had written to her, and she was at college. But I just want to read, when we talk about encouragement, and this is a cherished letter. This I love it. This is what she wrote. "Lib, in part, Lib, I am still praising God daily for your victory over sin. Just to think it is nothing that we did, only the blood of Jesus. Now this Easter morning, you too can feel that Jesus did overcome even death, and that He's not only living in the world, but also in your heart. Truly it is hard to explain, because it is a miracle of love and grace. Just lean on Jesus and pray that He will supply the strength you need every day. Obey him also. I find this is one of the hardest things to do. Each thing that you feel he would have you do it. But remember, we don't even do this on our own. He gives us obeying strength. So when I talk about the gifts that we use, when we have those gifts, he doesn't leave you by yourself. He gives you obeying strength when he calls on you to do something. I want to share with you a story that I heard as a child. It was just a little children's story, and as I grew up, it really had deeper meaning. But this is a story about a family that lived way, way out in the country, and this took place many years ago. And it was Joe and Tom and Sally and their ma and pa. Now, Joe and Tom had each other to play with, but during the summer months when they were out of school, Sally never had any friends. The nearest neighbor was miles away. And Sally didn't have any friends, but she did have one friend, and that was an old mule named Gussie. Now, Sally would go get old Gussie out of the barn, and she would walk around. Gussie would follow Sally everywhere, and sometimes she would just jump on old Gussie and she would ride bareback through the freshly plowed fields. Sometimes she'd go sit out under the old apple tree, and she would lay against the old apple tree, and Gussie would be munching the apples that had fallen off the ground, and she would tell Gussie all of her hopes and dreams, all of her troubles. Well, one morning at the breakfast table, Sally's pa announced that he was going on a hunting trip. And he said, I'll be leaving, and I won't be back for several weeks, so you children mind your ma. They all said, yes, Pa. Well, he left on this hunting trip, and Sally was kind of down, so she went and she got old Gussie out of the barn, and she was going along, and Gussie was following along behind her, as she did so many times, and all of a sudden, Sally heard something go clomp, and she turned around, and Gussie was gone. And she said, oh, Gussie, Gussie. Oh, she could see Gussie down at the bottom of a big hole. And she said, Gussie. Well, she ran screaming to the house, and she said, Ma, Joe, Tom, come quick. Well, Sally's mom came running out of the house, drying her hands on her apron. She said, Child, what is wrong? She said, Mama, it's Gussie. Gussie has fallen in a hole. Well, they went running down, and they stood there, and Sally's mom said, Honey, Gussie has fallen in the old abandoned well, and there's no way we can get that mule out. And Sally said, but Mama, this is my best friend. We have to get her out. And she said, now Sally, if your pa was here, he would just shoot Gussie, and then we would just cover it up, and Gussie would be out of her misery. But you remember your pa went on a hunting trip this morning, and he's going to be gone several weeks. And you don't want Gussie to stay down there and suffer all that time. You know, he took the only gun we have. Sally knew that her ma was right. She knew she had to mind her ma. And her ma said, I want you and Joe and Tom to go to the barn, get shovels and wheelbarrows, and come down and just get this covered up as fast as you can. And it won't take long for Gussie to smother, and she'll be out of her misery. Well, Sally was just so heartbroken, but she knew. She went up and they got the wheelbarrows and the shovels, and Sally said, let's just get this over with as fast as we can. I can't stand to look at her anymore. So she started shoveling dirt. And she was shoveling dirt and throwing it in that hole. And she shoveled, and she thought her back would break. And she heard something go, hee. She looked up just in time to see Gussie jump up out of that hole. Because you see what Gussie had done. Every time dirt hit Gussie's back, she didn't just stand there and take it, but she'd shake her back and stamp her feet so that every time she got higher and higher and higher until finally she was able to jump up out of that hole. She went over and she threw her arms around that old mule, and she said, oh, Gussie, you are the smartest mule in the world. Now, I asked you a little bit ago if you were smart as a chicken. How many of you in here think you're smart as a mule? If you live on this earth, ladies, you're going to have dirt dumped on you. And sometimes that dirt is by the person that loves you the most, your best friend, a co-worker, your spouse, a brother, sister, whatever. But we're going to all have times that we have dirt dumped on us. But I want to ask you, ladies, who dumps the most dirt on you? Yourself. We all do that. We look in the mirror and we look for all the things that are wrong, not the things that are right. You don't look at the gift that God gave us as being a woman and having a woman's heart. Now, we have to put up with a lot of things as women. We have to put up with things like PMS. I mean, let's face it, that's not easy. I know when I was working, I was kind of the office mama. And one of the young men there came to me one day and he said, you know, I'm having a really hard time at home. He said, every month when that time rolls around, said, I really think we're going to get a divorce. It's just awful. It's just awful. And he said, but we sat down and talked about it last night and said, I told my wife, if you'll just let me know, I'll help you through these times. And he said, I think things will be better from now on. Well, I didn't think about it anymore, but a couple of months later I happened to remember, and he came in my office and I said, I want to ask you, how are things going with you and your wife? And he said, well, I don't know, last night, said I could tell she was going through that bad time, and I was kind of watching her out of the corner of my eye, and I went over and I said, honey, how are things going? And said she turned around and said she smiled the sweetest smile. She said, I could claw your eyes out. But you know, we all have to look for those we're talking about lighten up and live. I know when I was going through a bad time, and I went to the doctor every other year. They do this blood test to see if I had started through the change. Well, sure enough, one day I had been to the doctor, and the nurse called me and said, the doctor says that you're starting through the change, so he's going to put you on some medication. So I called a meeting in the office, and I said, this is a warning. The doctor says I'm going through the change. Well, I had the men all upset. They said, how long is this going to take? I said, I don't know. 5 years. Who knows? The next day I called a couple of the men. They were peeping around the corner and said, look, she's changing before our very eyes. When I was having, several months later, I was having a really, really hard day, and I had run down the hall and I had put a bunch of copies in the copy machine to be correlated, and I had set that up, and I thought, well, while that's running, I can run back to my office and finish something. So I got back to my office, and so then I ran back down about the time I thought it might be finished up, and here stood one of the engineers named Ray. He was standing there holding my originals in his hand, and the machine was off, and I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I thought it had finished, but it didn't. It just ran out of paper, and I cut it off, and I said, you did what? You did what? Do you know how busy I am? Do you know how busy I am? Do you know that I've got to take all these copies now, and I've got to correlate them, and I've got to count them, and I don't have time to do that. And he said, well, would you mind getting some paper? And I said, you get your own paper. I'm not going to get my paper. And he stood there and looked at me, and he said, are you taking your medication? So it's always time just to lighten up a little bit and laugh at the things that sometimes they're not funny, but they're funny when you look back on them. Now, you know, when I talk about us looking at ourselves and looking for the good part of us, I had an experience, my little Missy sitting here, she is the mother of my great-grandson, Sebastian, and we had the honor of going down. She's from Union, and she wanted him to be dedicated to her home church. So we all went down there, and of course here's like 3 rows of people grinning like possums, and so the preacher called Missy and Elijah, my grandson, and holding Sebastian, to come to the front of the church. And the preacher said, who wants to do the proud walk? And Missy said, I will. So she gets little Sebastian, and she strolls up and down the aisles, showing off this little baby, because that was her child, and she was proud of him, and she wanted to do the proud walk with him. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know what, we ought to get up every single day of our life. Well, wait till you have your coffee. Wait till you have your shower. But get up, before you start your day, you need to go and look at yourself in the mirror and say, today, I'm going to do the proud walk, because I am a child of God, and He loves me, and I'm going to do the proud walk. Now, you know, my granddaughters are here today. One of them was up here in Savannah. You'll remember this. Some years ago, Savannah was in a little dance troupe, and she called me one day and she said, Mima, I'm going to be in the Inman Christmas Parade with my dance troupe. Do you think you could come and see me? And I said, absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world, Savannah. I'll be right there on the sidelines waving to you when you go by. Well, I didn't really know where. I had never been to the Inman Christmas parade, didn't have a clue where the parade route was, but that was a bitterly cold day, so I went in, changed clothes that day before I left work, and I put on black sweatpants, a black turtleneck, a big white sweatshirt, white gloves, and red earmuffs, and I set out to Inman to find that Christmas parade. Well, I got up there and I asked several people, where's the best place to see the parade? And they said, well, it's right assembled down at the high school, so if you go there, you'll be able to park and beat the parade. So I did. I found the high school and I went down there and parked and got out, and just as I got to where the parade had assembled, it started moving. And I thought, well, that's no problem. Parades move slowly, don't they? I can get to the front of the parade. So I started running along beside that parade, and I was passing bands and clowns and floats and old cars, and I kept saying, how far up is the front of the parade? And they said, just keep going, you don't have far, just keep on. Well, I ran and ran until I thought I could not run another step. And about that time I saw my son and his wife, and I said, whew, boy, am I glad I found you? I don't think I could run another step. My son looked at me and he said, Mama, Savannah's float's already gone by. It was the second one in the parade. I said, but I promised her I would be on the sidelines waving to her when she went by. And he said, Mama, I can't help it. Her float's already gone. Well, I stood there and I remembered the commitment that I had made to my granddaughter. And I thought, I can do this. I can catch that float. So I got back out in the street. And just as I did, this big red fire truck was coming along. And I looked at that fire truck and I thought, I believe I can outrun it. Because the tires were moving very slowly. So I got along with that fire truck and I'd be at the front tire. Then I'd be at the back tire. Then I'd be at the front tire. And then I'd be at the back tire. And then I happened to look at the crowd and they were waving to me. I thought, man, this is cool. They think I'm part of the parade. And I had never been in a Christmas parade before, but I had seen how the beauty queens did, so I smiled and I was waving to the crowd and they were waving back to me, and all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, I am running along beside a big red fire truck and I'm dressed in black and white. They think I'm the dog. Well, about that time I just gave up, but that red fire truck stopped. And I got past it, and I got past the next float, and the parade started up again. And I thought, I can't do it. I can't make it. So I stopped. I took a deep breath and relaxed. And a funny thing happened about that time, because you see, I couldn't run any further. But I heard a voice, Mima! And I looked up, and 2 floats up, I could see my Savannah sitting on the back of that float. And I was motivated and I was energized, and there was no doubt in my mind that I could catch that float. So with a burst of energy, I raced past and I went up to where that float was and I gave her a big old hug, and I looked, and here she sat with her dance troupe, all dressed in black and white with big red earmuffs. I figured I might as well milk it for everything it was worth. But that next day, as I was nursing my poor old sore muscles, and I had things that hurt on me that I didn't even know I had. But I thought how strange it was that I had completely given up. I could not go another step until I stopped, took a deep breath, relaxed, and listened. And it was then that I heard the voice of my granddaughter, and I knew that I could make it. Ladies, how many days do you have when you feel like you're trying to do something as impossible as outrun a big red fire truck? That's just not enough hours in the day to get all that you have to accomplish. There are days when you're going to have those, and I challenge you when you have those days to stop, back off, take a deep breath, relax, and listen. Listen for the voice that will motivate you. That voice that will speak to you from God that says, you are my child. I promise never to leave you. I will always be right here with you. That may come from a friend. Maybe that's the day that the friend calls you or pats you on the back or sends you a card or gives you that word of encouragement. I heard a preacher talking one night about a young boy that was crying in his sleep one night, and his mother ran to him and said, son, what's wrong? And he said, I'm scared she said, you have no reason to be scared because God is right here with you. He said, I need someone with skin. Now, don't we all need girlfriends? We need each other. We need girlfriends. We need that support, don't we? We need that. Now, you know, Jerry is a speaker also, and some years ago we had a program due down in New Orleans, and we decided to drive down. And we got on the interstate, and we drove for a couple hours, and we pulled off this ramp, and there was this little white store building there. We went into the store building, and here was this big sign that said, warning, all activities in this building are being recorded by Seymour Security Company. Well, I had a problem with that because I had gone in there to use the bathroom. And I knew I couldn't make it to the next stop. So I went to the restroom and I eased the door open. And I thought, I wonder where the camera is. Do y'all know it takes almost a whole roll of toilet tissue to completely wrap your face and head? Because I decided if Seymour Security Company was going to get a videotape of me, they were going to get the end that would not be easily identifiable in a lineup. Well, when I went on to New Orleans, and we stayed at the Monte Leon Hotel down there on the French Quarter, a beautiful old hotel, and the bellhop ushered us up to our room, and when he ushered us in our room and opened it, and it was this beautiful, magnificent room. It had this king-size bed, 4 posters, and a wooden canopy all the way around the top of it. And I stood at the foot of the bed and I said, oh, it's beautiful. And I noticed these 2 pictures hanging over the bed, and for some reason I could see these same 2 pictures hanging way up high, and I couldn't figure it out until I looked. There was a mirror over my bed. I didn't want a mirror over my bed. Well, we had to be down in a meeting, so we hurriedly changed clothes and we went downstairs, and I was so exhausted from the trip, and I told Jerry, I said, I have got to go back to the room and lie down for a while. Went back to that room and flopped across the bed and went sound asleep. I must have slept 15 or 20 minutes, and all of a sudden I got one eye open. I thought, someone's in this room watching me. Then I got the other eye open. I thought, ooh, I'm having one of those out-of-body experiences that I've heard so much about, because I could see myself lying there. But in just a minute, I remembered that mirror. So I lay there, and I folded my hands across my chest. And I thought, now this is the way I'm going to look when all my friends file by and say, well, she looks so natural. And then I could just imagine a group of friends standing around looking down and saying, isn't it wonderful? They're finally together. I said, what do you mean they're finally together? Her husband's still living. Said, no, I'm talking about her lips. I hadn't seen that mouth shut since she went through her midlife crisis. But if you ever want to be motivated to live every single day of your life to the fullest, you find you a place where there's a mirror on the ceiling. You lie down and you fold your arms. You're going to be motivated when you get up, because you see, the best thing about waking up is not Folgers in your cup. But the best thing about waking up is waking up. Know that we have another day to live on God's beautiful earth. You know, we have to keep ourselves motivated and keep ourselves built up to be the best that we can be, because if we don't take care of ourselves, ladies, we're not going to take care of anyone else. So we have to take care of ourselves. Remember to get up every morning and do that proud walk and be proud of who you are. Be proud that you are a child of God. Now, I know I was out at the mall one day and I saw a lady that had obviously had a lot of birthdays, and she turned around and she had on a t-shirt that said, "Wild Thing." Now, don't you know that she was still having a good time regardless? And laughter is so important. You know, Eleanor Roosevelt once said that age will wrinkle your skin, but lack of enthusiasm will wrinkle your soul. And none of us want to have wrinkled up souls, do we? No, we don't. But But I'm going to do you with a little, another little rap. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to come back and finish. But now, if you think about when how do we keep ourselves built up? We have to have something to kind of motivate us at times. You know how it is. And particularly, the older you get, the more you need this. Well, have you noticed that there's a lot of people that refer to people as birds? They say that man is a bird, or that woman is a bird. Now, if anybody ever comes up to you and says you are a bird, say thank you, because that means that you have a twinkle in your eye that starts at your toes and it comes up and it radiates love for life and enthusiasm, and people are drawn to that. They're drawn to it. But you think, why do they call us birds? Well, you think about it. If a man goes bald, he's bald as a eagle. And what happens when we get these ladies? Crow's feet. And if this turns loose, turkey neck. That's just from here up. No wonder they refer to us as birds. But I want to leave you with this little rap. And if you ever have a day in your life when you feel like, I just can't do it anymore, you get up and you do this, and it's going to pick you up and make you feel young and vibrant and able to do it again. So come on, give me some rhythm. Some folks are birds, and that's no lie. Bald as an eagle or crowfoot eyes. Now, if you ever reach the point where you think you're old, get up and do the turkey neck stroll. Now, it makes no difference if you droop and wrinkle, as long as your eyes keep that twinkle. But if your eyes don't twinkle, you'll get old. So get up and do that turkey neck stroll. Now, if you have another birthday, it won't show, because you know you get better as the years come and go. Who cares if you get a little middle-aged spread? Beats the heck out of being dead. So take a stand, be brave and bold. Get up and do that turkey neck stroll. Now, if you gain a little here and lose a little there, just keep on smiling and don't despair. Keep your attitude young, and it won't matter as long as you can keep control of your bladder. I knew y'all were going to like that one. Because it's a natural fact, you'll never get old as long as you can do that turkey neck stroll. And just remember, if everything goes wrong, don't ever let life beat you, because remember, you can always go out in the desert and die and let the buzzards eat you. Ladies, I hope you've had a good time tonight. You know, when we come together, and I honestly think that the angels rejoice in heaven when he sees God's people laughing. Because you know what, when you're laughing, you're not in pain, you're not hurting. All your troubles are set aside for the times that you're laughing. You know, I don't know what your situation is or what you will leave here with tonight, what you will go home to. Some of you will have burdens. You know, I was talking about my marriage, going through a midlife crisis and crumbling. God chose to heal my marriage. All marriages aren't healed. You know, God stepped in, and instead of him giving me death, for which I so foolishly prayed, he fulfilled the promise that he made to me and to you in John 10:10, when he said, I have come that you may have an abundant life. I read a story in Guidepost some years ago that stuck with me. It was out in Salt Lake City, and there was a woman out there, and she was trapped in an elevator. And the workers came to her rescue, and they hollered down the elevator shaft, and they said, are you alone? She said, no. They said, how many's down there? She said, it's just me. Said, I thought you said you weren't alone. She said, I am by myself, but I am not alone. Ladies, if you have Jesus Christ, if you have asked Him into your heart as your Lord and Savior, you may be by yourself sometime, but you'll never be alone because He is there. He is there. I thank you for being a good audience. You have been incredible. But one challenge that I would like to make, I am so thankful to my friend in high school that didn't forget about me, but came to me and shared the love of God and led me to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Who's going to tell about you? Who's going to tell about you? Who's going to call your name? That I remember when she did that. I remember when my friend came and shared Jesus Christ. Because you see, regardless of what happens, whatever I am and whatever you are, to God be the glory. Great things He hath done. So loved He the world that He gave us His Son. Do you love Him? Do you serve Him? Have you committed your life to Him so that He can fulfill the plan that He has for you? God bless you. Thank you.
Let's give her another hand. Ladies, this was wonderful tonight, and we've had a great time and a great meal. But most of all, we want you to become the ladies God wants you to be. And if any of you have made a decision, we'd love for you to mark that on your card, on your prayer card. We'd be thrilled and rejoice with you in that. And if you'd like to talk to anybody, many of us are available. Marianne or any of the ladies on the committee would love to talk with you. So please seek us out. We'll be around afterwards. Again, thank you for coming. We look forward to our next meeting, March 23rd. 2006. That will be a great time together. And I'd just like to close in a word of prayer. Thank you, Father, so much for bringing us here tonight, for all the ladies that could be here, and for the encouragement and the challenge and the fun and the laughter. Help us, Father, to be the ladies that you want us to be. And Father, help us to have your strength and not try and do things on our own. Give us safety as we go home. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed.